officer for many years for the county in the sheriff's office, and I understand and know how to teach these kids. We lost the program because of funding. We have funding. Everything revolves around funding. Folks, we can actually do this. This is something that we can do, but it's going to take a several-prong effect, and that's where my experience comes in, having dealt and taught the programs in the school, so I know how to reach down to the children, because if we don't give those kids a hero, they're going to find one on their own, and that's where we need to step up. So if we start stepping into this and giving the education and into treatment, and I'm for incarceration. So let's take care of business, but no, I'm not in favor of legalizing any of that. And like Pat said, marijuana is a fluid. It's this thing that's going to continue to roll as long as, you know, so we're going to have to keep dealing with that. And as sheriff, we're going to have to make do with dealing with that. And the district attorney is here, and he's number one around here about wanting to fight this stuff. So we can do this, but we have that to deal with.
I also agree with the candidates working narcotics enforcement. I remember being parked on the side of Modesto undercover and had a beard and some earrings just to play the part, and people were walking up to me, "Hey, are you selling? Can I buy something?" So it's out there, and anyone knows that you know, it's been a long battle against narcotics. Luckily, the supervisors decided to pass an ordinance to limit 12 marijuana plants, and hopefully we can continue to curb and eradicate that situation. As a council member of the city of Livingston, we had two businesses that wanted to put in smoke shops in our city, and I was against that. One, because I coach kids. I want to be a positive role model to kids. I'm also have a good rapport with kids, and I'm able to turn around kids. I had two kids that played on my team that had brothers that were in gangs, and I told them, you have a choice. You have either a choice to follow your brothers, or you have a choice to make the decision yourself. So no, I am against narcotics, and like I said, we also have to find different avenues and different approaches, but we need to make sure that we stay on top of that. And I am for also incarcerating. We know that the big cartels have billions of dollars to pour into narcotics, and gangs and cartels go hand in hand. So we need to focus on assertively, aggressively going after gangs, and from there we can move on up. You know, you take one down, another one takes its place. It's going to be a continuous revolving door, but we have to continue the battle, and we need the help from the community. If you see something that's not right, call it in, and we'll support you. So.
Hi, my name is Jeff Connell. I live here in Atwater, and my question for all three candidates: do you have any ideas or plans to help curtail the gang violence that's escalating in our county?
Like Pat said, there's sometimes you have to get a specialized unit to go take care of business, but a lot of the problem that we have with our gangs is the same thing we have with our drugs. A lot of it is education. We need to go after the gangs physically, take care of them. In order to keep the gangs there, we have to be able to incarcerate them. And if you've seen or heard about our Sandy Mush Hilton, where they decided to leave at their own wanton, but we've also got to make it so they don't want to come back. I was working in court in Los Banos a couple weeks ago, and we had a bunch of inmates in there and doing the prelims and this and that, and had this old boy, he was all shackled up, and he looked up at me, he says, "Man, I hope they keep dragging this out." And I said, "What are you talking about?" The longer they drag it out, the longer I get to stay here. I don't want to go back to that Santa Clara jail. I'm thinking, what? He's thinking this is a wonderful place to be. We've got to be able to do that, but as far as having the absolute plan, we just keep going after it. War on gangs, war on drugs, like you said, this is something as a society we need to combat together and actually do something about. And incarceration is one, education, and it's going to have to be 2 or 3 different prongs to go after this.
Yes, it is. I told you originally that I started the first gang unit in Merced County because it's a specialized unit that takes some of the burden off the patrol deputies, and I think we need to do that within the sheriff's office. We need a gang unit. We haven't had one for a while. Number 2, Vern alluded to it, we've got to train the deputies to to better utilize their time and focus on gang activities. The best way to do that is to enhance our intelligence gathering capabilities. Once we get them identified, we've got to determine to go out and do something about it and get them. So that's the third thing we do. And then, of course, Vern hit it right on the head when he said we've got to educate our youth. The one thing I've learned over all these years is that some of these programs don't have an immediate impact. Sometimes you have to wait a year or two, or sometimes 3 or 4 before they have a real impact. But if you get those programs started, particularly at that young level, even preschool, it's been proven time and time again that the money that you will save will come back many-fold over what you invest in it. So that's what we've got to do, is we've got to hit them if they're in the gangs, and we have to prevent them if they're not in the gangs.
I also agree we do have a gang issue and gang problem. I've worked with gang officers and I've worked on the streets, and I know how gang members think. Norteños, Sureños, we have MS-13, we have all kinds of different gangs, and I know the mentality and I know how they work and how they operate, and that's something that we need to continue training our officers and deputies. I'd like to see me personally, a felony task force also involved, working together with the gang task force, and that also is correlating with other local police departments. Maybe we can have a reserve officer, another officer, and form a county-wide task force to go after felons, to go after gangs that are a big issue. We just know down the north of us, Winton has a big issue with gangs. I drive through Winton because I'm a Rotary member in Winton, and I see all the graffiti, up on the fences, and everywhere we go, we're going to have some kind of gang issues and problems. But we need to be assertive and aggressive, and then also, like my colleague said, we need to also educate and start at a young level. That's one of the reasons I get involved with Police Activities League and coaching our youth.
I'm Jack Mobley from Merced. I don't think, it seems like so far you can't put a piece of paper between your answers because they're all right. I think that we're very blessed to have 4 individuals seeking this office that are highly qualified, highly motivated, and desire to do the job well. So as voters, I think it comes down to a question of who has the best capabilities, who has the most experience. In my humble opinion, not law enforcement at all, but it seems though the sheriff is more of an administrative position. And so experience with budgets, experience with planning, experience with administrative duties seems like a top priority. So maybe you can tell us what experiences you've had in those areas, and what other personal qualifications you feel like you have that set you apart from the others.
Well, I have worked on grants, and I'm one of the officers that brings solutions to problems. When I first started law enforcement, my chief in Newman, I brought him this problem. He says, I don't want to hear problems, bring me solutions. And that's something, the light bulb came on. So every time that something came up, I'm like, Chief, this is what we have, this is what I came up with. So that's great. So now he can decide what he wants to. If he likes my great. If he wants to add to it, great. And you're right, sheriff is an administrator. Just like me as a council member, we give direction to our city manager in turn to the chief of police. We give direction to staff. They bring back that information and we make decisions on that. And hopefully we make good decisions to improve the quality of life in the community. I've worked with grants before, and I'd like to have someone that grants are great because their grants are not loans. And I want to have someone that's going to be able to have really good experience focusing on grants so that we can get funding. The funding is out there. We just can't give up and say, well, the money's tight. It is out there. And, just north of us, Stanislaus County applied for the jail, and they were turned down, and now they were assertive, and now they're gonna be getting $40 million for their new jail. So money is out there, we just have to look for it. We have to not give up and be assertive in looking for those grants and looking for money. We give direction to our city manager, and he aggressively goes out there, and we just got 1 point something million for, our water wells. So I'm looking to make sure that we have someone in place, and I also want to be involved in the grants and make sure that we have money put to good use.
I said earlier about my experience with the budgets, but I'm going to disagree on one thing, that the sheriff is not an administrator. The sheriff is a facilitator. The administrator comes from the folks that are working for the sheriff. The sheriff has to be of understanding and the knowledge of what's going on in the county, has to be able to reach out and talk to the people. The sheriff has to be able to do the job that's required of each person in that department. When we start talking about this, my plan is put somebody in there that's an administrator that knows budgets. We've got some people in place now. My job is to reach through this divide that we have and come in and have the folks get involved in a solution. The budget, the knowing my way to Sacramento, I know that if I get on Highway 99, I drive 2 hours and apply my brakes, I'll be in Sacramento, but I do know what this county is about. I've worked and I've lived in this county my entire, from 12 years old. Where we differ here is I have the ability to actually teach every position that we have in the department. I've worked in the coroner's office. I've worked in the courts. I've worked in dispatch. I've worked the entire gamut. I can teach that, and I think that our sheriff has to have the understanding and be able to do that job specific. You hire somebody to take care of the budget. You hire somebody to administrate some of the other things. Your job as sheriff is to facilitate and make sure that stuff works. And that's where my forte is. I've had a lot of deputies ask me to run for sheriff because of my ability to get things done. I roll up my sleeves, I jump in the middle of it, and I can work it. I can roll up on a crime scene and see the detective sergeant doing it, ask him, what do you want me to do? My job at that particular moment, if he asked me to go direct traffic, guess what the sheriff is going to be doing? Because the detectives are handling the call. I'm not going to get in there and tell them how to do it. Please understand, Jack, and I admire you for all your knowledge and everything that you do. And he said, it's time. We'll talk later.
Well, thank you very much. I think what you have to realize is that, look at it this way, the sheriff is your safety company. You are going to hire a CEO to run this $43 million company over the next 4 years. And our most important product, the product it puts out that affects most of you directly, is our patrol division. The interactions we have, the things that we do on patrol can only be as strong as the whole organization. So you have to have somebody in there that knows how to run an organization of 43 million with over 300 employees. You have to know personnel law. You have to have people in there that put down personnel rules and regulations and policies that don't get you into trouble and don't get you sued. You have to manage the budget. You have to live within your means. You have to manage your technology. You have to keep abreast of it. And you have to keep bringing it in. Merced Sheriff's Office last year went to New World Systems as a record management system. Last year, I brought New World System into California, the first one in California 20 years ago. That's the kind of CEO sheriff that you need to vote for or hire. Sacramento, I'll tell you, one of the problems that we're having right now because of 109 is the legislative stuff that came out of that statute 109 that brought everybody back. Unfortunately, the previous sheriff stood up there and supported that, and that's why we're having problems. I spent 8 years up there. I understand the system. I know kind of how to pull the levers, and I can do the kinds of things that will benefit us as your sheriff. And so that's the difference, I think, that we have. And Vern and I have a little bit of a difference on this one. And I'll tell you, if I thought that being the sheriff was working in the field and doing those kinds of things, I'd vote for him. I wouldn't vote for me. So that's a clear distinction I think we've drawn.
Bill Baker from Merced. Recently, we've been inundated with the news about what's going on in Nevada. Obviously, you guys are running for the most powerful law enforcement position in the land. Basically, the sheriff is not just an administrative sheriff's department, but he's the most powerful law enforcement officer in the land. One of the differences between what happened recently in Nevada and what happened back in 1997 was the difference in the sheriffs. The sheriff back in 1997, when the feds moved in to run Clyde Bundy off of that BLM land, the sheriff said, "I will arrest you federal agents if you don't leave our state." And they left. The new sheriff, or the sheriff that they have currently, was MIA, missing in action on this ordeal, I feel. And so my question here is, what do you think that the federal government role is as opposed to the state government role? And what position would you take in an instance like that?
Well, to tell you the truth, Bill, I don't know all the details of what happened up there. I've only read the accounts in the newspaper, and sometimes those aren't always correct. But I will tell you, I believe that the 10th Amendment enumerates what the state's rights are. And I do not think the federal government ought to infringe on those rights. I think that some of the stuff that happened as it evolves over many, many years has to be protected. The number one goal of the sheriff in those situations has to be to keep the peace. Nobody wants to have somebody shot. We do not want a Ruby Ridge. We do not want a Waco, Texas kind of incident, which happens when sides get inflamed and overheated. So I think that the state's rights are not enumerated. I think the 10th Amendment talks to that, and I would protect those rights.
I was told about, or less than a week ago, that we had a rancher in the Snelling area. The Department of Wildlife, the federal wildlife folks, showed up at this guy's ranch as he is swathing his land. They said, we'd like to buy your crop because those endangered blackbirds with the little red tips on their wings like to eat that, and we would like to buy the crop. And he says, I'm sorry, I need this for my cattle, because he's suffering a drought situation. The very next day, that same federal government had a sheriff's deputy in tow and handed him a writ to cease and desist until these birds were taken care of. Folks, I had a problem with that. And I think a lot of it is a lack of education with regard to the state's constitutional rights. And like Pat said, and I believe him wholeheartedly, he's going to stand there, I'm going to stand there, we're going to take over, and we're going to take and protect the rights of our citizens. You guys heard the difference between Pat and mine, and done a lot administratively, but I'm going to tell you right now, his heart, my heart, we're here for this county, and that's where we're going to stand. So that stuff that happened in Snelling this past week should have never happened. And if you have a strong sheriff, it won't happen.
You are correct. The sheriff is very influential, and it's probably one of the only positions that could tell Jerry that I'm not going to do what you're going to say, Jerry Brown. So, very influential. I will defend your rights also, and that if that means going against the feds, the feds have their hands in a lot of things, and I don't always agree with it, but I would defend our rights. And just like Mr. Warnke said, I don't agree with what happened in Snelling either, so I would go up against the feds if that's defending your rights, and being right is wrong, then I don't want to be right.
This question is for the next sheriff. No, all three. Name is Gannon. I'm an Atwater farmer. It was touched on before about farm crime, and I realize it's always a question of budget. But I don't think that there's any officer right now assigned to farm crime in Merced County. I hope your views might be a little different about that. It's a question.
That's the question. We do have an officer, he's a detective, Roy Ty, he is our agricultural crime detective, he does, but you got one detective for the entire county. Back in 1986, I was the first detective actually certified by the state as an agricultural crime expert, and to include livestock theft and slaughter. We do have to get back into that. We had a very active, they called it Ag Star team once before, and they were out there and they were taking care of business. But it seemed that somehow it got lost, and again, the federal government stepped in and said, you know what we need to do is we need to go after the drug cartels. Believe it or not, the sheriff's office was receiving $100,000 and spending $300,000 to fund this, and they were we actually sent folks into the state of Arizona looking for a drug kingpin. We need to focus our efforts right here. We take that $100,000, or that $200 actually that we actually spent out of our pockets, because the $300 we got $100 of it back. Big deal. We can do this. We've got to do this. We've got to focus on our agricultural base. If we don't do that, this is what this valley is all about. If we don't start taking care of our farmers and our ranchers, we're going to end up having to leave, and we're going to have to go someplace else for food, like Mexico or Japan or China. Folks, we got to take care of this. If we don't do that, and the folks in our ranches and farms keep losing money, we do have to put a big focus on that, and that is something that I'm very passionate about, and be right up in front there taking care of it. If I have to go out a graveyard shift by myself to do it, that's my pledge, is to be able to go out there and take care of business.
I think there's two parts to this question we have to deal with. One of the most successful programs that I've seen in Merced County is the Hillmar Farm Watch. 2,500 people all connected through Facebook and emails. When they see something go down, they're instructed to take a shot of it with their smartphone, post that, and everybody, all 2,500 then are watching. So when a deputy does get up there, somebody knows where this guy is and something happens. It's a very successful program, featured in the Wall Street Journal. We got to expand that. Second thing we got to do is, I just reviewed several days ago an operations plan from Tulare County where they went after the recyclers. And they put together a sting operation. They worked in collaboration with other counties, with agencies within the county, and it was a very successful operation.